Hey, what up writers? I'm Violet. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on the writing craft book on writing and world building, Volume 2 by Timothy Hickson. I am so excited about this book. I actually had bought it quite a while ago and had it sitting on my shelf and was waiting till I was maybe working on a more fantasy heavy project, because for me, like, what I'm reading in terms of craft book versus like what story like I'm working on currently is like very affected by that. So I didn't really want to jump into it until I had something that maybe needed more world building, but I don't know, I couldn't resist picking it up after a while. So if you remember, I did also do a review on Volume 1. So I would just say right off the bat, you definitely do not have to read Volume 1 to read Volume 2. There are sections where like topics were relevant for Volume 1, and then he will reference them like, hey, you know, I go further into depth on this topic in Volume 1. So it's of course not necessary, but yeah, I'm definitely, for the sake of the review, going to be comparing them in some ways. So that's just what it is. This is Volume 2. I'm assuming that most people watching this review have read Volume 1 or are just interested in buying both as a series. So right off the bat, like, the elephant in the room is the fact that there was sort of a redesign in the cover style. I don't know how people feel about it. I kind of, in a way, feel like a little bit slap in the face, because like the people who bought Volume 1, like when it first came out or before this came out, now do not have a matching set. And it becomes really noticeable when they're on the shelf like this, that they have the different style. I do like the Volume 2 better, actually, the new spine, but I prefer the cover of Volume 1 with the split design versus the new design with just the singular cover. This looks, I don't know, to me nicer. And I loved how it like wrapped around to the back. Like, oh, I loved that. Anyways, so actually I think I prefer that with Volume 1, but the spine of Volume 2 I like better. So I don't know, it's just a little bit irksome, like I said, having it on the shelf not matching when they're actually supposed to be a matching set. I mean, now you can get this this kind of style version of Volume 1. Like, I'll put up the picture of what it looks like now. So if you buy Volume 1 now, they will be a matching set. It's just, if you had bought it before, it's kind of like, oh well, now you don't have a matching set. There's that. One thing that I think Volume 2 like really like out of the water, like heads above Volume 1 is with the formatting. The formatting of this book is so beautiful. Like, I don't know, like the headings and the page numbers is really well done. Like, and again, they always have the summaries at the back of the chapter and like bullet pointed list of like everything that was covered in that section. And I even had like a marker on this page because there was like a little graph included. I was like, oh yes, more of that. I love that. So yeah, I have to say it was really good in that way with the formatting, because like if you look in comparison to Volume 1, the margins are very tiny and it's like not as nice. It's, yeah, just not as nicely formatted. Also, Volume 2 did continue with what I really loved, is having all the properties that were going to be used as examples at the front of the section. So you would kind of know going in like what was going to be used like as a spoiler warning. You know, some of the things that they use as examples aren't necessarily spoilery. I talked about, if you watched our Nostalgia Train book club chat on Inkheart, that Inkheart was used as one of the examples in the Dark Lord section, and I ended up skipping over it because I was at that moment reading Inkheart and didn't want to be spoiled, and then went back, and then it wasn't spoilery at all. It was just kind of talking about, yeah, how the Dark Lord was used in that one, but in a non-spoilery way. That was hard to say. Anyways, so yeah, I do really like that, and I think that should really be a standard for all like writing craft books. Like, put your examples up front, tell people so they don't just get blindsided with a spoiler. Yeah, that was really great. I mean, they're also highlighted in the text, so I could see Inkheart was like not highlighted, italicized in the text. So it's like, oh, this is the Inkheart example. I knew it was coming up in that chapter, so then I could just skip over it without being spoiled, even though it wasn't really a spoilery one for that. But exactly my point is, if you didn't want to be spoiled for something, you could avoid it. And for me, that is major. Again, with the summaries at the end of the chapter, is like, if you want to go back and use this as a tool and be like, hey, I am actually writing a redemption arc, let's go see like what the bullet points were for that chapter, the summary of everything to remember. it just makes it a great tool to have with you to use again while writing. It's not something that you necessarily would read once and be like, yes, I have that. It's something that you can use as a reference while writing. And for me, that's what's really great about the On Writing and World Building series. So like when you're writing something and it comes up like, hey, I need to know how to, do a mentor character. You can be like, I know that's in volume 2, and pick it up and check it out and reread that section or just read the summary. And for me, that's like what a craft book should be. If I read a craft book once and I'm like, okay, I'm never gonna need to reference that again, it just is taking up space on my shelf. That's just how it is. I don't need to hold on to a copy if it's not gonna be useful for me to come back to later. That's just my personal opinion on that. But otherwise, I don't really have too much to say about volume 2. I think for me, the On Writing section in volume 1 was stronger, but the On World Building section in volume 2 is stronger. But again, I think that's a little bit just personal preference. One kind of nitpicky thing about volume 2 I had about the beginning, especially the On Writing section, was the order in which the topics went. Because it starts here, fight scenes, handling pacing, mentor characters are the first 3 topics that you get into in the book. Versus volume 1, where the first topics are prologues, the first chapters, and the exposition problem. And to me, like in volume 1, like that pulled like me in, even just like reading a nonfiction craft book. Like prologues are so divisive. That's where the story begins. First chapters, exposition, like it was really great and like got you into the book, especially for like some of the later stuff in the On World Building section, which was pretty dense in volume 1. Whereas this started with fight scenes, which I thought was such a weird choice to start off the book with. I think there were definitely stronger topics in the On Writing section that you could have started with. I think flashbacks and backstory would have been a good option to like start off the book with, or even the escalation of power and magic systems, especially since, like this is volume 2, we're escalating. We learned about hard and soft magic systems in volume 1, and now we can learn about the escalation. Also, even just starting with first person, again, if you wanted to talk about starting with something a little bit divisive in the writing world, that would have been an interesting one to start with, in my opinion. So I don't know, that's kind of nitpicky, but it just kind of got the pacing off to a weird start. Like I know like maybe if you're talking about a craft book, pacing is kind of a weird thing, but I think just rearranging those topics would have made it like even that much better, in my opinion. But like I said, I really enjoyed the On World Building section in this one, particularly the sections on class, wealth, and power. So that like in volume 1, they had like this little trio of empire topics, and here they have class as sort of the trio of different topics. And I think that was so great, so useful. It was some of my favorite sections of the book. Also just fantasy, alien races, monarchies, place names. They were all interesting and helpful topics. I think in general, like Timothy Hickson's writing can be a little bit like dense and dry at times, like, using a lot of like historical and real world referencing stuff can come off, like I said, a little bit dry, but it's relevant for the topics of world building. Like you should be kind of, thinking about real world stuff in history. So it's not always super flashy, especially like if you compare to like his videos on Hello Future Me, which of course have like graphics and colors and stuff to make it more exciting. Of course, in book format, it just comes off a little bit more sluggish, but again, it's appropriate for the subject matter, so it works. Like there was nothing in volume 2 that I found like too like problematic or too crazy. Like in volume 1, I had some nitpicky things about some wording, but I didn't really find anything in volume 2 that was like a red flag for me. I think it more just comes down to, at the end of the day, like if these topics are more interesting to you. I think a lot of people, would probably want to buy the matching set, but you definitely wouldn't necessarily have to. Yeah, it's good. If you enjoyed volume 1, I think you will enjoy volume 2. If you are more interested in some of the topics here, fantasy and alien races, world histories, monarchies, place names, class, wealth, and power, cities, towns, hard versus soft magic systems, like if these sound more interesting to you than what's on offer in volume 1, definitely you can just pick this up and enjoy it how it is. So in general, I am just a huge fan of this On Writing and World Building series done by Timothy Hickson. I don't know if he plans to release more volumes, but if he does, I will definitely buy more. I know one thing I said in volume 1 is like I would have loved to see exercises put in, and even if there was like a companion workbook put out for the On Writing and World Building series, like I would totally buy it. I would totally use it. I think that would be a great asset to this series, just because a lot of the craft books that I've read and reviewed have exercises, or some of them even have like workbooky style to them. And I think that's super helpful as a writer, because sometimes you can read about how something is done, but then putting it into execution can be a little bit more difficult, and having like broken down into small steps, like, hey, try this, try that, make a list of this, or, you know, whatever the case, like those type of writing exercises can be super helpful. So that would be kind of one thing that like I wish the series had, or like I said, even as like a companion workbook after the fact. So yeah, I don't have too much more about that craft book review. If you've read these, I would be interested in your thoughts on them, or if you have any other recommendations for world building craft books, or just craft books in general, because even though I have several unread ones on my shelf still, I'm like always looking for more. I just love reading about writing and trying to hone my craft. Reading about writing has been such a joy for me, and I really enjoy it, and it is helpful, and I feel like I've learned so much and be able to implement that stuff in my writing. So I know that I have some friends who don't love craft books, but I do, and I'm assuming you do too if you're watching this review. Anyways, that's gonna be it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.